Right. Hello. I'm here with Willie Mims, who Willie is currently the chair, education chair of the East County NAACP. I'm just excited, Willie, because we spend so much time where I had to talk to you via the Brown Act, where you were coming to the MDUSD school
Right.
board. And so we were limited. You only had 3 minutes and I could only respond so much. And here we get a chance to talk. So thank you so much for joining me, Willie. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself, Brian?
I'm fantastic. So, I know you're a longtime activist, longtime educator. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So let me say this first of all before I start talking about myself. I want to say something about you and your position as the chair, as the president of the Mount Diablo Unified School District Board. And I wanted to compliment you on being a fair player as your role as the chair. You heard what people were saying, especially you heard what I was saying, and sometimes you would come back and qualify and clarify some things for me. And I didn't really get that from too many people. So my hand goes out to you for doing that, you know. And
Well, thank you.
also you surprised me because I did not know that you were going to be such a great president, you know, a respected president.
Well, thank you.
So I wanted to say that. Yeah. So anyway, I have been on this battle, I would say, since I was 16 years old. I participated in the Rumford Fair Housing Act, which was in the 1960s. I was about 16. I was walking the streets, knocking on doors, and asking people to support the Rumford Fair Housing Act. And so I started off at like 16, 17, and I got involved. I and my wife both got involved together on the political arena more actively when we got married, and we joined a few organizations. And my models at that time were women, where I had one black man as a model. His name was George Ely, and he was very active. He was the one who recruited me for the Rumford Fair Housing Act. But the majority of the models that I had, role models that I had, were black women. And these women were out there. They were at city council meetings, school board meetings, especially in Pittsburgh. And so when I finally got somewhat involved, I was just a mere observer because I didn't know anything. So if you don't know anything, you shouldn't open your mouth up, and because what could you say? You can't say anything. Uh, I realized that the first time I opened my mouth up, I thought I knew something, and it was a city councilman from Pittsburgh. He asked me a question that I could not answer. I mean, because I really didn't know how to answer it, and so but that chalks up as experience. But the issue is this: you as you grow, you learn, and as you learn, you become much more active. I became fully active in about the late 1990s when the Pittsburgh Unified School District was having their battles over a superintendent that they wanted to get rid of. Well, the first time was a recall. I participated in 3 recalls in Pittsburgh, in the city of Pittsburgh. The first one was the city council. We recalled three city council people, I think, and I almost got 4, and we missed the 4th one by about 60 or 70 votes. And then the next time was about 1999, I think, when we recalled, or 2000, when we recalled the organization that I worked with. We recalled a whole school board except for one. And yeah, it was battles out there. So I became very active then, but I was really never a participant. I would go to school board meetings and maybe say a few things, and then but there was one. Um, um, I forgot this lady's name. It was one black parent, yeah, and she was a former teacher, and she would go to every school board meeting, and she would always get up and say something. Um, and 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 during the time of the battle with the superintendent and the school board and the recall, I was starting to become more active then. And so one board meeting, now this is what changed me. One board meeting I went to, It was about, I don't know, about 150 people that crammed up in this place. And I walked in and I walked over to speak to her. And she said, you're not gonna speak? You know, because I didn't have anything in my hand, you know. So I had no idea that I was supposed to speak. But what I realized later on, that she was passing the baton to me because she was old. She was really, you know, in her late 80s, probably like that. And so she was passing this baton to me. And I didn't realize it at that time. And I said, never again will I ever go to any meeting without having something to say. You know, so that's how I really got involved in being real active in the school districts around here. You know?
Well, and let me ask you, you mentioned, you know, Black women were your role models in a lot of ways. And yesterday, such a historic day that, you know, we went from having our first Black president to having one of our most racist presidents,
right.
To now him being succeeded with Joe Biden and our first female vice president who is part Black, you know, mixed race. Tell me, you know, how historic a day was that? What was your perspective on yesterday, and how are you thinking about that?
You know, when I look back, so I keep looking back at January 6th and what happened then, you know, and then what happened yesterday. It's like you exhale, because it was 4 years of holding your breath in for this madness. You know,
I slept well last night for the first time in a while.
Right. Right. I mean, you know, so you exhale, man, because of this, of you holding your breath in and all this madness that we've had to endure over these past 4 years. And so, you know, but back to your original question, you know, I was quite proud of that event because, you know, we already had a Black president. You know, even though I really didn't agree with a whole lot of stuff that he did do or what he did not do, I used to argue with my wife all the time, and I couldn't even mention Obama's name in a bad manner. Okay, so no, man, that was a crime. Okay, so I just, you know, kind of, you know, because I am a equal opportunity critic. You know, so I don't care who you are, what you are. You know, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm gonna say it. You know, but I have to be very careful about saying anything about Obama. Okay, I mean, my grandkids, I couldn't say nothing, man. You know, don't say nothing. Okay, fine. So I just left that alone. But you know, with the Kamala Harris, that is a blessing in disguise. Something that I never contemplated that would ever happen in this country's history, especially with the election of Obama. I never thought that would happen either. You know.
Yeah. And when you talk about like Kamala and that path, or let's even take a step back. You talked about Obama. What were the things you can tell me? I won't tell anybody. But what were the things you think that Obama didn't do? Where did he fall short?
Well, you know,
did he not go far enough? Did he not push fast enough? Or what were the things you thought Obama didn't do?
Well, you know, one of the things that he could have done his first 2 years there, because he did, the Democrats did control both the House and the Senate on Obama's first 2 years. He could have pushed for the statehood for DC. I mean, you know, he could have done that, but he didn't. You know, he could have pardoned a Black man by the name of Jack Johnson. You know who Jack Johnson was?
The boxer? The
boxer, yeah. Donald Trump pardoned him.
Yeah.
You know,
and what was Jack Johnson? What was his crime back in the day?
Messing around with white women.
Yeah, taking a white woman across the state line, right? That was
that's what they charged him with.
Well, and she went very willingly, didn't she?
they charged Jack Johnson because, you know, when you look at Muhammad Ali and how he fought, how he bothered people in the ring, Jack Johnson was 10 times worse. And all of his opponents were white, and then he would beat them up. He would just beat them up, you know. And so the white world did not really appreciate that. So they were trying to find anything on that man, you know. So they got him for crossing state lines. Whatever crime that is, I don't know, you know. But that's a different. different times. But I would say that Jack Johnson at that time was probably the bravest black man in America, because he was going through the South, during that time, with a white woman in his car. That was that was lynching. I mean,
Yeah.
but he when I look at him, man, I just shake my head. I mean, because they lynched many black people back then.
And that was before Jackie Robinson. That was,
oh
I mean,
yeah,
he was,
1910, man.
yep, he was 30 years before Jackie Robinson, and the vitriol and the hatred that was there for him. So
right, yeah. So yeah, so anyway, what's going on now? I'm looking at. I have not had an opportunity to really go to a lot of Zoom board meetings. It's different, man. These Zoom.
Yeah.
You kind of set yourself in going to one or two, or city council meeting, one or two or three, a maximum of 3 a week. Sometimes a fourth one with some community meetings, something like that. But now it's worse though, because you got so many Zoom meetings. I missed the Martinez City Council Zoom meeting. Somebody sent me a text yesterday reminding me about the Zoom meeting, but I was so tired. I had 2 meetings yesterday, and I had one right after this one. I got 2 tomorrow. They can be overwhelming. Even though it's convenient because you don't have to leave your house, but it's too convenient because they can set up another Zoom meeting, the next day. So it's not like leaving the house every day going to a regular meeting. So that's one of the issues, that one of the drawbacks and negative things about the Zoom meetings themselves. But it makes go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask what that, this summer where there was so much going on and the protests, and I know that you're someone who wants to be out there and is out there on the front lines, and yet now we've got this pandemic, and so you're balancing that. What's that been like, and what impact has that had on you, like as an activist?
Well, I'm not sure. So explain, what do you exactly mean? Which part?
So I mean, are you able to participate? Are you still out there participating? Are you having to change it a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Now, when the Black Lives Matter protest was going on, from June on, I participated in every protest march in East County, and even the one put on by the Martinez. The county lawyers, what do you call them? They had a big protest march there, right in front of the court building.
Is that where they had the painting and someone actually tried to paint over?
Yeah. So I've been that one. The painting I did not attend because I had a conflict. But the ones that happened in Martinez before that, I attended all of those in Pittsburgh. A few of those in Concord, one in Walnut Creek, 1, 2, 3 in Antioch, 2 in Brentwood, I think, and 1 in Oakley. So yeah, I put some miles on my feet in June, man. I put 26 miles of marching on my feet. You know.
So let me ask you, in terms of your marching, and one of the things, and I might be paraphrasing, but one of the things I believe I heard you talk about once was, Donald Trump talking about making America great again, and that for you as a Black man, has America ever been great? And just your perspective on that. I'd love to hear, how you think about that. And, it's one that I think a lot of people, when they first hear it, go, well, of course America has been great, but has it been great for everyone? Has it been great for you? What is your thought around that?
Well, when you look at this country's history, America has never been great for Black people. African American people in this country spent 246 years under a system of slavery unknown to any country in this world. And folks, when they talk about slavery, they always want to compare slavery to other folks' slavery. Well, the main difference, except for the chattel slavery, and the other one, is that this was a slave system based upon religion. So it was Christianity that indoctrinated and sustained this slave system itself. No other slave system had religion as its background as this driving force, except for the one that took place here on the shores of North America, and also the Western world participating in this madness. But as far as great, I can only tell you one time that that this country had any semblance. I'm not going to say great, had any semblance of democracy, and that was in a city called Wilmington. I think it's Wilmington, South Carolina, or Wilmington, North Carolina. I get them all mixed up, and that was the only semblance of democracy to ever exist in this country prior to the. I'm not sure that it exists today, but that city, it had this is about 1890, something like that. So it had a diverse elected city council, both black and white. It had a diverse police force, fireman force. Everything was diverse, and the folks, both white and black, got along well in this community. But on the outskirts of that community were old Southern rebel whites who detested the community that they were looking upon, because that community was a thriving community. So you had these Southern whites, former rebels, who looked at these people and this community, and what they did. It was the only time in this history that a duly elected government was overthrown, and nobody did anything about it. They ran everybody. They ran everybody out who held any position. Period. And in fact, they killed so many black folks. But so it's called. But it's called Wilmington, South of North Carolina. But it was the only place where a duly elected government was overthrown in this country. Now, the closest that we came to that was on May 6th, 2021, with Donald Trump and his people, But yeah, so that's the only semblance of democracy. But in terms of America being great, I'm not sure for who. It may have been great for Donald Trump and the folks he represents. If you notice that in that assault upon the Congress, there was a big rebel flag. What did that rebel flag represent? Slavery. And there was also a hangman's noose out there. Yeah, they say will hang
Mike Pence or
Mike Pence, but that hangman noose is a representation of the lynching rope that over almost 5,000 African Americans were lynched. That's what that represented to me. I understand, hey, Mike Pence, but no, when you got a rebel flag with a hangman noose out here, that's the lynchman's rope.
Yeah. One of the questions I've been kind of grappling with is the idea of reparations, and California is one of the states that's established a commission to look at it. But when you look at even what Abraham Lincoln did of freeing the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation, but financially, nothing really was done for the slaves, and the compensation went to the slave owners, not to the slaves themselves. Mm-hmm. And we still had policies here where white immigrants from Europe and other places received land and were incentivized to do things, and you didn't have that for Black people. Can we look at it like and so there's this idea of reparations, but how would you do that now? Does that make sense, or what? I'm sure that's something you've studied. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
Well, during the Civil War, there were two generals who, when Abraham Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. Let me back up. So you said, so I want to make sure we get something clear here, and your audience get something clear. Yep. That Lincoln did not free anybody. He issued a Emancipation Proclamation, but didn't free anybody. Okay, but his Emancipation Proclamation only dealt with those states that were trying to succeed from
In
the Union.
rebellion. Yep.
You're right, but the other ones who still held those folks in slavery, they were able to continue with their system. And the problem that we have here is that, so Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, it was issued for a reason. Prior to that Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's soldiers, I mean his generals, were pleading with him to allow the black soldiers. See, there were black soldiers who had been trained to fight, but Lincoln did not want them to participate because he didn't want anybody to think that it was the black people who came in to save this Union. So he didn't want the black soldiers. This is Lincoln. I'm gonna tell you something else about him too. He did not want them to participate in the war at all until the North had won one major victory. Up to that point, the South was kicking the North's butt, and because they hadn't won anything. And so the generals were pleading with Lincoln, turn the black soldiers loose. We need them to save us. This is one of his top generals. And so Lincoln, when he issued that Emancipation Proclamation, it was issued right after the North they claimed that they won a major victory, but it was a minor skirmish that they won, and that's when Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation. 6 months later, one of his generals, he issued an order freeing all the enslaved African people on the North Carolina shore, something like that. I forgot the name of that, but he gave all that land. Because he said, this general said that, I think it was Sherman, it could have been Sherman or Hunter, Sherman or Hunter, one of those. He freed all, so because you know, in those, during the war, the generals, they had tremendous power and command over wide grasp of territory. And so he issued his field order 11 or field order 15. And he freed all of the enslaved folks in his area that he controlled. And he said that, you know, since you are in rebellion against our government, then I am going to, so you don't have a right to do anything. So he went in there, took his army in there and freed all these people. And he gave this land to the freed enslaved African people. What Lincoln did, no more than 1 month after 1 month later, he recanted that field order and sent those black folks back into slavery. So Lincoln, you know, was not a so-called friend, that much of a friend of black people that folks want to believe. Also, Lincoln, are you familiar with an amendment? No, are you familiar with the 13th Amendment?
Yes.
What is it?
13th Amendment was the one that finally outlawed slavery, correct?
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you know that there was another amendment? The original 13th Amendment? Do you know about that one? It's called the Corwin. You can write this down. Corwin. It's called the Corwin Amendment. And that was the original 13th Amendment that Lincoln was poised to sign. That amendment had been passed by both the House and the Senate, and it was on its way for ratification through the states. That amendment, if the South had not fired on Fort Sumter to start the war, Lincoln would have signed that amendment because he didn't want the South, you know, he didn't want any war. So he was poised to sign that amendment that would have resulted in the permanent enslavement of black people. So this Lincoln here that people think, you know, he wasn't all what folks believe he was, you know, but it's the Corwin Amendment. It's still on the books. It is a constitutional fact. It cannot be removed, and all it is waiting on is for the states to ratify it. That's all. So if we get a bunch of conservative Republican type states that are anti-black, they can send this amendment through the states and appeal it and put black folks back into slavery. It's right there, you know. But anyway, that's Lincoln. Let me say another thing about slavery
So-
and slaves. Okay.
all
So,
right.
okay. So let me set the record straight here. They did not bring slaves out of Africa. They brought prisoners of war. Prisoners of war. That's the difference, you know. They didn't bring slaves out of Africa. They brought prisoners of war and brought them here to the shores of America and put them in slavery. So to call someone a slave is a form of dehumanization. So you cannot see a slave. You can see a human being with chains and shackles around their neck and their arms and hands. You can see a baby with chains. Well, you know, I mean, when I went to Gorée Island in Senegal, and 20 years ago, I saw chains for babies. So when you call someone a slave, you can't see a baby with shackles around their arms, or little kids with shackles, men and women with shackles. So the say slave is a form of dehumanization because you cannot see a human being. You know, you see an object, but there's no face to it, no anything to it. You know. But anyway, I wanted to make sure I got that straight. So I encourage folks, don't use the word slaves because it's a form of dehumanization. You are dehumanizing the very people whose humanity was almost taken away from them.
Yep. So reparations.
Oh, reparations. Yeah.
And actually, here, before we get to that one, let me ask you another question. I'm lining up. I'm gonna have a conversation with the president of the San Francisco School District, and I'm sure you've heard that they're looking at renaming the schools there. And Mayor London Breed has said, you know, this is not something the school board should be talking about right now. They should be focused on getting kids back in school. But they're looking at, you know, some of these historical figures like Lincoln. Should we still have public high schools in California named after Abraham Lincoln?
No.
What do you think about that?
No, because the majority of folks do not know the true history of Abraham Lincoln. You know, I mean, yeah, he did some things. You know, he was the one who was the spearhead behind the conclusion or the ending of the slave system here in America. But you know, the issue we can't overlook his history. We can't overlook the fact that he was bound, he was poised to sign an amendment that would have resulted in the permanent enslavement of African people in this country. That's what we can. But people don't know anything about the Corydon Amendment. It's hidden in the cesspool of American history.
Well, and Lincoln's whole thing was save the Union, and he said, if keeping slavery will save the Union, I'll do it. If eradicating slavery, and which is largely why he ended up, you know, with the Emancipation Proclamation, with the 13th Amendment, pushing for that in a different form. But that was his whole thing. He was less concerned about slavery as an institution, right? That he wasn't personally outraged, but you know, I think that the Confederacy was battling to keep slavery. Mm-hmm. Lincoln was battling to keep the Union.
Right. To save the Union.
Save the Union. Right. Okay. So now let's go to the question, reparations. You know, there's 40 acres and a mule being promised, and you know, this long string of promises that haven't been kept. But where do we go today? Do we look at something like that? I mean, you look at rates of poverty, you look at median family income, you look at the likelihood of attending college, and that Blacks in America today are still significantly behind. And a lot of this is generational. When you've given white families the foundation for wealth, and that perpetuates and compounds over time. But how do you make that up? Do you look at reparations, or is that something that's too difficult? How do you think about that?
Well, Brian, first of all, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit this fact, but Black people built this country. You know, without the 246 years of free labor, we built this country for free. I mean, the cash crop on the world market during the 18th century, 17th, 18th century was cotton. Who picked the cotton? The other cash crop was tobacco.
Yeah.
So, but the other issue was that there was it was either General Sherman. He issued one of his field orders it was either Sherman or Grant or Hunter, one of those three generals. But it was a fuel order that they issued. One of those folks issued a fuel order giving blacks 40 acres and a mule and land. The land was given to them, the land on the North Carolina areas, and what Abraham Lincoln did, he gave it back to him. But I'll say one thing about Lincoln, though, just to be fair to the man. His second term in office, one of the things that he was the first president to meet with black clergy. He wanted, and he got his general. It could have been Sherman, one of them. His statement was General Sherman or Hunter, one of them. He said, "Since you are a friend," let me quote this: "Since you are a friend of the black people, I know what they want." So Lincoln, by saying that, he's saying he's not a friend of the black people, but this general is. So this general, he sent this general down to the South to talk to these pastors because the war was over, to see what they wanted, what kind of land or horse and whatever, mules. And so they met with him, and it was determined that they would get some of the land off the South Carolina shores, along with 1 acre. I think they would get, I forgot how many acres, but they would also get a mule too. And what Lincoln had put that in place, but he got assassinated, and the person who took his place, just like the person who took Barack Obama's place, went back and undid everything he could do. So this Johnson recalled that Lincoln's order, and he said that no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to give him anything. And so black folks got kicked to the curb again. So in terms of reparations, yeah, we deserve reparations. I mean, look, we were promised. If black folks had not, and then that's the reason why Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation anyway, because the North was going to get their butt kicked. They had gotten their butt kicked, and they wasn't going to win no war. There was 240,000 African American soldiers waiting on the wings to join the war, to fight. They fought in over 200 battles, and the generals stated that without them, that the North would not have won this war. So when you say Lincoln free, no, it was black folks and the role that they played in that Civil War that resulted in their own freedom, and also in the freedom of their people.
Yeah. So where do you think, in terms of trying to improve race relations, improve this?
Brian, can I go back? Okay,
please. So
you asked me. So what can they do? I mean, in terms of reparations. Well, I'm putting it this way. How many black folks in this country? About 45 million, 40 million?
Yeah.
I would say,
so
let's say
like 12, 10 or 12, it's a little more than 12%, right? They're 300 something. Yeah.
So let's say, okay, let's say they represent 50 million people, man.
Okay.
So, okay. So you look at the history of this country, the 246 years of slavery, the 100 years of lynching that occurred, and people just sat around. Nobody really paid any prices for all the lynching, for all the destructions of these black communities like Wilmington, Tulsa, Durham, South Carolina, Rosewood. So these were teeming black communities that were destroyed by white racist Klan people. They got nothing for that. And so my issue is that, look, you hurt black people from the time that they came to this country all the way up to this day. They're still hurting. So my point is this: when you can give the military hundreds and billions of dollars, a war machine, when you can send money all over to other countries that you, like to Israel, billions of dollars over there, and to help support them, you can at least give $1 million every black person in this country. What is $1 million to give to the ancestors of the folks who endured the most horrific form of slavery in the history of the world? What is that? You know, and let me say this about this form of slavery here. What this slave system did, you know, you want to always compare and contrast. What this slave system did was that everybody who participated in enslaving folks, the enslaved population came out of that system with their names intact. Our names are not intact. I don't even know my real name. My Willie Mims is the name of probably some slave owner whose name was Willie and last name was Mims. But I don't know my real name at all. I have an African name though. It's called Shea Amadou Bamba. It was given to me in 2000 when I went to Africa. But the African people here, the African American people here, got their names beat out of them. No other system did anything like that. But anyway, back to, you know, give them $1 million. Give everybody $1 million. That ain't nothing. That's crumbs. When you can fund a military machine for billions and billions of dollars every year. I mean, you know, so that's just simple. That's a simple little thing. It's not going to hurt this budget in any kind of way. It may hurt these racist people who say, well, you know, well, we did this. You know, you didn't do anything. You didn't spend 246 years of slavery. You were not confronted with 100 years of lynching at all. Your communities were not destroyed and burned to the ground because racist people did not like your productivity and the success that you did, you know.
Yeah. And so we live in, you know, the Bay Area, which is regarded as a, you know, very liberal area. And yet I know you've seen aspects of racism for your entire, you know, career in activism. But even lately, what are you seeing? Where do you think, how far below the surface do you think the racism is, and how overt do you think it is in this area?
You know, it's not as you know, I would, you know, in one aspect it's not that bad, but in the other aspect, you know, when you look at the school systems,
yeah,
you know, and I've been observing the school systems, you know, the school districts, and within this part of the county, you know, for many years, and when you see, you know, when I see the same type of education or miseducation, as W.B. Boyce put it, the miseducation of the Negro. When I see the miseducation of African American people, African American students, in terms of not just, you know, I mean, not just in Mount Diablo, in Martinez, in Vallejo, in Pittsburgh, in Antioch, and Liberty, Brentwood, and Oakley, in this part of the county, it's all the same. So it's systemic racism. When I look at the suspension rate across every school district where we have a substantial number of African American students, they're the ones who have a disproportionate number of suspensions. In every school district on the California State Assessment scores, the African American students are the lowest on the totem pole. In some areas, like 90% of them on the fourth and fifth grade didn't even understand what they had read. 96% in one school district, a seventh grade class, did not understand the spoken language. Didn't get this. Didn't understand the spoken language at all. But it is systemic across the board. So when you ask me, you know, about did I notice any difference? You know, I have to look at the data. You know, I know you got good white folks, I mean, you know, who mean well, but there's not enough of them. There's not enough of them. We don't have enough of them in the school districts. We don't have enough of them in the police. You saw what happened on January 6th. You had the police, you had the army. I mean, all those guys are part of the problem. You know, they're so, you know, so it's kind of hard to say, you know. Yeah, but you know, the Bay Area is much more liberal. You know, it has done. On the other hand, it has. I've noticed. Well, let me qualify. There has been some significant changes, especially in the electoral process. You know, we had a DA, so the DA could not have gotten there without the overall support of all the communities. You know, And I don't like to use the term communities of color because that's a term that's somewhat foreign to me. And I'll explain that later. But when every one of the communities got together to support the DA and get her elected. In Pittsburgh, we have four city council people, and we got 3 school board members. In Antioch, we have 2 3 city council people, and 1 on the school board. And in Liberty, you have 1. Mount Diablo, you have 1. So so you asked me a question, and I'm telling you about a change. A change has come. So so it is. I would say it's much better in the Bay Area, this part of the Bay Area now than it has been in the past. So we have people who who speak and walk the truth at the same time.
Yep. No, and I think one of the keys is that doing things like going to elections by district, which we did in Mount Diablo, because during my entire time on the board, it was always me and 4 white women.
I know, man. I know.
And so, I think for us to have made some progress, and those systems aren't perfect, and you hope you still have good people coming out, you have contested elections, but I think it's one of the ways that you get away from having, more and more, if you have districts that maybe they're 55% white. Well, if the election is district wide, you're going to see
no chance.
You can see 5 white people elected, and you'll continue to see versus any sort of bringing different perspectives to it. One of the things I want to pivot to, and Dr. Clark, our superintendent, who I know from back in the day, that he and I have talked about, is that the educational disparities that we already have with distance learning are just getting bigger. And one of the things you might have seen down in LA school district, that what they said, LA Unified said, is we're not letting kids come back in until they're vaccinated. And one of the concerns I have is that, I think that there are members in the Black community and probably members of the Hispanic community who have a lot of concerns about this vaccination, that especially the Black community, when you look at things like Tuskegee and, this history of, there's a concern about being experimented on, or being guinea pigs, frankly. What do you think that impact's going to be like, and how do we kind of reconcile those two things, that kids who are already behind in school? You mentioned the higher suspension rates, and during my time on the board, we were under a consent decree when I came on the board from the Justice Department, that we had so many issues, and we were able to move away from that. But it's still not where it should be. And, I'd be the first to tell you that we still have those disparities, still have those gaps. How do you kind of reconcile that? Like, I just feel like the longer we have kids out of school, the bigger that gap becomes. How are you thinking about that? How do you think we address it?
Well, when they first shut down the schools, so I posted something on Facebook, and I said, this shutdown may be a blessing in disguise for the Black students. That way, so there'll be a repose or a reprieve in terms of them getting suspended from their schools. The high suspension rate. They were not learning that much anyway. When you look at the California assessment test scores, that's across the whole county in this area. So, and also you look at the state too. So they weren't learning too much in the first place. So I thought that maybe they'll be able to learn a little bit in this COVID-19 shutdown, but they're not. It's worse. It's worse. So, but you're talking about getting a vaccination in terms of in order to get back to school. But I'm not, I'm really, I understand the history of what they've done to Black people. Black people have been the most experimental people since the inception of this country. They was experimenting on us since about 1670, something like that. There was a great book called Medical Apartheid, and it deals with the whole medical experimentation on black folk from 1619 all the way to the 1970s. You know, I mean, even the Tuskegee experiment. If you think about the Tuskegee experiment, it started before Hitler, and it was still going on in the 60s, way past Hitler. So Hitler was gone, and the United States was still conducting these syphilis experiments on black people. You know, so when you talk about what we're they owe us, all right. They owe us, and so it's like a debt unpaid. You know, I mean, these are crimes that were committed, and nobody wants, you know, they want to dismiss it because it happened to black people. You know, it reminds me of I talked about that all the time. It reminds me of the Dred Scott decision. You know, you familiar with the Dred Scott decision?
Yep.
Okay, you know, 3/5 of human beings.
1856. You know, he didn't have standing to sue, right? Because he wasn't a person. He wasn't a citizen. He couldn't even sue.
3/5 of a human being. That's right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you can't see the humanity of folks, you know, okay, we can do this too. Okay, it's no big deal, and so there's no big outcry. So the big, and I'm kind of deviating a little bit, but the big outcry came with the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests. That was the outcry that black people had not been receiving from hardly anybody at all. You know, even when in the time of Martin Luther King, we had few allies. We didn't have the kind of allies we got today, you know, who are supporting us across the country, every state in the country, and all of them across the world. You know. But anyway, I just got deviated a little bit on that.
No, well, I think, you know, one of the, I think it was Bernice King, but one of Dr. King's
daughters,
children, I think it was one of the daughters, talked about the fact that, you know, at the time he was there's, you know, the pictures, the imagery of, you know, Dr. King holding hands with people and the I Have a Dream speech. But she pointed out the fact that, you know, Dr. King said things that pissed off a lot of people. And he was probably the most hated man in America at the time he died, even though he had won, you know, the Nobel Peace Prize. But you had J. Edgar Hoover, you had the FBI, you had people after him. He, you know, Lyndon Johnson was very distrustful of him. He had spoken out against the Vietnam War.
That's what got him killed right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm glad I brushed up on my history a little bit. I'm a Civil War fan, so I was ready for some of your questions.
So you know what I'm talking about then.
I know what you're talking about. But let me ask you, what are some things that you're hopeful about? What do you think some things that can be positive going forward here? What gets you excited in the morning?
Okay, so, you know, I don't know, Brian. I don't know if I can answer that question, but I just say that, you know, with the election of Joe Biden and the Vice President Kamala Harris, you know, one of the things that I would be happy about is that he put forth the DC statehood to the Congress, and that through the Congress. You know, that'll prove that he really appreciates the role that black people played in getting him elected. And nobody, and people want to really diminish the role that we played. I mean, it's like all the swing states, the last one, it was in Georgia, you know, the way on those counties with the significant number of African-American voters. It was the African-American vote that got him in there. But it was the first time that we had some other support coming to help us elevate this election. You know, so I don't want, you know, people don't, you know, they want to try to diminish the role that the African-American voters played in this whole election. Even Joe Biden said in South Carolina, thanks to the African Americans, and he even said that you know in his speech. You know, so I just want to make sure that folks, you know, but they don't want to give recognition. Now, I'm not talking about people who are not of the African American political spectrum. They really don't want to give the credit that's due to the African American voters and the role that they played in changing the direction of this country by electing Donald Trump. They couldn't do it by themselves. They've always been the primary supporters of the Democratic Party, the most
Yep.
loyal supporters. No other group can say that. None. I mean, they can say that they came on board this time, but black folks have been the most loyal ones. And so the Democratic Party do owe us something. They owe us reparations, what they owe us, put it that way.
Democratic Party owes you, and I'll tell you, I thought Joe Biden, I thought he was toast after Iowa and New Hampshire. I
Wiped
thought
out.
he had the one person, the singular person most responsible for Joe Biden being in the White House is James Clyburn. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because without him,
Clyburn.
without winning South Carolina
He
the
was
way
dead on
he
the
wanted,
right.
he was done. He was
Gone.
done. And that is what changed the course of
Everything.
this election. Yep.
Oh, it is.
So,
Clyburn.
the DC statehood, and here's my thing is Obama came in and had a huge, had 60 seats in the Senate versus this 50-50 with
Right.
The vice president
Right.
breaking ties, and a much bigger majority in the House, and yet
Correct.
kind of had this veneer of bipartisanship. So we're going to try to work with these people, even though you had people like Mitch McConnell who said, my number one agenda is to be against anything that Obama is for.
And make him one-term candidate.
Make them a one-term. That was from day one. And so, I'm hoping that Joe Biden comes in and says, and we saw, there is no better example than what Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump did with putting a Supreme Court justice in while the election had already started. Merrick Garland 4 years before couldn't get a vote, but they went ahead while the election had already started. While millions of votes has been cast, we're going to go ahead and ram through a Supreme Court justice. So you know that Republicans are doing everything they can to flip the Senate, flip the House in 2022. So we got 2 years, probably one, because then you get into the election year in 2022. So we have this year, and I think DC and Puerto Rico as well. I mean, when you look at what the idea behind the American Revolution of part of it being, taxation without representation. Well, if you live in Washington, D.C., or if you live in Puerto Rico, how is that different? How is that American to be there without having a voice, without being able to vote who your president is, and without having, this idea of, you have non-voting members of Congress, representing DC, I think is just such a joke.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think the chances are? Do you think we'll see statehood for DC?
Well, that's on the before December. I don't know, man. And like you said, you mentioned Obama. That's one of the issues I had too. When you got that kind of majority, you don't have the guts to bring it forward. You want to be nice guy. Hope people come around. Ain't nobody came around for him. So I hope that Biden just take a Donald Trump type stand. I mean, what do you got to lose? You ain't lose nothing. I mean, but as far as the DC has more population than I think the states of Delaware. There's about 3 or 4 states that they got the bigger population. Also, unlike Puerto Rico, DC, the District of Columbia was at one time, you probably noticed too, was the largest holder of enslaved black folks in America. And with the you familiar with the DC Emancipation Act of April 15th, 1860.
I'm not. Tell me about it.
No, I'm sorry. No.
1861. Was it 1861 or 1860?
No. The DC Emancipation Act of 1862. Okay. April 15th, 1862. It's called the DC Emancipation Act. DC had more enslaved African people than any part of this whole country. And that act was the first emancipation. Well, actually, we actually had 4 emancipations. They only talked about the one, the Lincoln issue, but there was 2 or 3 before him. But the DC Emancipation Act freed all enslaved people in the District of Columbia. There was a senator who pushed the end to end slavery in DC. He said that it was an embarrassment to the whole world for the nation's capital to house more enslaved people than anywhere in the world. I mean, anywhere in this country. So he pushed it. Lincoln signed it, but it was not Lincoln's act. It was pushed by both the House and the Senate, and Lincoln just signed off on it. But what that D.C. Emancipation Act did, and you're talking about reparations, it gave each each owner of an enslaved person, I think $400 or something like that, $400 for each one. And it gave black folks, the newly freed slaves. Okay, I'm gonna use the person, newly freed enslaved folks, $100 if they left the country. If you don't leave the country, you ain't getting nothing. So the people who have been working for free all this time were given an option: leave this country, $100, or you get nothing. But the folks who they work for got two to $400 for each enslaved person. Nothing. So we got kicked to the curb on that end. What? And every year on April 15th, it's a national holiday. You know, I mean, remember a few years ago when the tax day came on April 15th, they didn't have it, they had it on the next day, because April 15th is April 15th or April 16th, and one of those days is a national holiday in DC. All banks are closed, no nothing. I mean, it's a national holiday. It's called Black Emancipation Day. It was the first act in which Lincoln signed, which actually he freed about 3,200 enslaved African people in DC. You know, yeah, the DC Emancipation Act of April 16, 1862. And then later on, 6 months later, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation because he needed those black soldiers to come into the war to help save this union, you know, which the history books don't talk about.
See, this is what I appreciate you, Willie. Every time I talk to you, I learn something. You keep me on my toes, and it's always a lot of fun. So,
it's been a pleasure, man. You know, I mean, it's been some time, and I said, no, I ain't never done this thing, something like this before. Yeah. What Brian gonna do to me? I did say that, man.
You did. And I told you. I said I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I know we'll have some fun, and I know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You were right. So, you were right. You were right, man.
So I want to have you back soon. I want you to stay safe and keep doing the work you're doing. So thank you, my friend, and take care.
All right, Brian. Thanks.
Okay.